Tonight, don't get distracted by the headlines. Don't get distracted by the slogans or the yard signs championing for the kids, because the biggest story might be the one hiding behind the word education. Picture a city spending billions on public schools, not millions, but billions. Picture press conferences about progress, new initiatives, new slogans, new consultants and administrators. Then picture a simple question, the kind a parent would ask sitting around the dinner table. Why can't my child understand math at their grade level? And the answer, depending on which spreadsheet you're allowed to see, might be a number that makes your stomach drop. Because when a system gets rewarded for appearing to improve, it starts to behave like a system that only needs to look healthy. Budgets go up, but outcomes stay down, and the data gets complicated. Tonight, we're stepping inside what one investigator calls a failure factory, where accountability gets diluted, buried, and relabeled, and where the question isn't whether the money exists, it's whether anyone can prove where it actually goes. Because what if the real conspiracy is that the truth has just been audited out of the story?
Raise your glass to mysteries, cocktails and conspiracies. Dive into these histories, cocktails and conspiracies. Raise your glass to mysteries, cocktails and conspiracies. Uncover those anomalies, cocktails and conspiracies.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you may be, whether you're tuning in across the nation or around the world. My name is Shane Squarick, and I am joined, as always, by our Sultan of Skepticism, Mr. Phillips. We are your conspiracy realists, back with another sip-driven dive into the stories that make you raise your glass, an eyebrow, and maybe check that budget twice. Tonight's episode is a little bit different. No UFO crash sites, no secret underground bases, no declassified alien autopsies. Instead, we're going back to something far closer than home that we touched on a little bit a couple episodes ago and can deep dive a little more. Your tax dollars, your schools, your kids, and the uncomfortable question that sits right in the middle of all of it. How can a public school system spend nearly $2 billion a year and still have shockingly low student proficiency rates? Joining us tonight is a man who has spent nearly a decade pulling on that thread. Chris Papst is a national Emmy-winning investigative reporter with Fox 45's Project Baltimore. His deep dive into Baltimore City Public Schools earned recognition from the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences, and his reporting has sparked serious conversations about transparency, accountability, and where education dollars actually go. He's also the author of the Amazon best-selling book Failure Factory, which lays out the blueprint of what he uncovered. Chris, welcome to Cocktails and Conspiracies.
Thank you so much for having me here. I appreciate it. Great intro. Very, very well done. Impressive.
It's a lot to kind of work through too, you know? I'm trying to
there's
get
a lot
through it,
in
get it
there.
in, get into the meat and potatoes here, but hopefully sets the stage because everyone out there is liking and subscribing right now, I am sure. Mr. Phillips, we tackled a little bit on education maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, I think, at this point. And so it's kind of a timely conversation to bring Chris on here. I think we're probably ready to ask you one of the questions a lot of parents wish that somebody would ask of their districts or of their states. You actually had reached out to us because you've been digging into the story for years now, one that points into serious dysfunction and potentially corruption, although we don't want to speculate yet, inside the public education system that's obviously entrusted with billions of taxpayer dollars anywhere, not just specifically Baltimore. As I mentioned, education is something that we care deeply about here. It obviously affects families and communities, shapes the next generation. And when something inside that system isn't working or is being intentionally obscured, that matters. You've lived with this investigation. You've followed the paper trail. You've talked to the insiders, you've seen all of the data up close. So for anyone hearing this for the first time tonight, can you kind of set the groundwork for us? What's the core issue? What did you uncover?
So as you mentioned, I work for Fox 45 News Project Baltimore, and what we are is we are a team of 5. We are 5 journalists. There's 2 photographer editors, 2 producers, and myself as the reporter. And we started in January of 2017. And when we first started, what we were planning on doing and what we're still doing today is an investigation into one topic. And we are 5 people who spend every single day of our professional lives investigating one topic. And we picked public education. And the reason that we picked public education, as you so eloquently pointed out, is that public education affects everything else. It affects crime. It affects taxes. It affects your home values. It affects your local economy with the job force. If there's one issue that I would argue is the most important issue, is public education. And in 2017, the reason that we picked Baltimore City, which over the years, 9 years, has since become the counties around Baltimore, and now we pretty much cover public education throughout the entire state of Maryland. The reason that we picked Baltimore City is because we could see with federal data that Baltimore City was one of the most funded large school systems in America and had been for years. But was also, through federal data, we could see that it was one of the lowest performing large school systems in America and had been for years. And the basic question, guys, was why and how? Why is this happening year after year after year? And how is this happening? And 9 years later, I wrote Failure Factory because I believe that after doing this for every single day of my life for the past 9 years, we have been able to answer the questions of how and why this is happening. And I wrote Failure Factory because it's not just happening in Baltimore. This is happening throughout the entire country. We are seeing massive increases in funding going into public education every year. I mean, you hear your mayors, you hear your governors, every single time a budget comes out, what do they say? We are putting record amounts of funding into public education. But what do they not say? We're improving student outcomes, because what we see year after year is the money goes in, but the student outcomes don't improve. And Failure Factory was written to really try to educate the country on why and how this is happening.
I laugh because I'm just internalizing everything you're saying, and my head wants to explode. If I was wearing a blood pressure cuff right now, it'd be peaking out right now into hypertension stage 3, because there is probably nothing that bothers me more than the amount of money that goes into public education, the product that comes out. And I'll dive into my personal experiences with that a little bit later. From your experience, what was that moment when you started looking into the Baltimore school districts? Was there a specific report or a tip or some data point that lined up that kind of tipped you off to the fact, outside of the perspective of what you just said, is like money's going in, results aren't coming out, but that doesn't necessarily always warrant conspiracy or corruption or mismanagement, right? It could be a number of other economic factors or social
I can tell you the exact moment. So this is gonna take me about a minute to get through, but this is what's really important about this. So in January of 2017, I was an investigative reporter working for the ABC News affiliate in Washington, D.C. when I got this call from Sinclair Broadcast Group, who owns the ABC News station and also owns Fox 45, if I wanted to do this Project Baltimore thing. And when I came to Baltimore to take on this job, I had people that were coming up to me because I already had developed a pretty good reputation as an investigative reporter. And they're like, listen, Chris, what you're going to find, like if you really dig into this and you're really trying to find answers, what you're going to find is this. The public education system is no longer prioritizing education. It's prioritizing the acquisition of funding and then the usage of that funding to hire adults to grow the political power and influence of the public education sector. So a little bit about me is that my dad was a public school teacher for 35 years in Pennsylvania. He taught woodshop. I grew up in a woodshop. And he was in the union for 35 years. And I went public schools K through 12. So did my brother. My kids go to public schools. So when I heard that, I outright rejected it. And my pendulum, started, all the way on one side. And then here's how my pendulum swung. In mid 2017, we broke our first big story. So what I did was I started looking at state test scores for Baltimore City. And there's 165 schools roughly in the city. And by organizing all the test scores, what I found were there were 6 schools in Baltimore City that did not have any students test proficient in any subject. Hundreds of kids, not one of them was proficient in anything. Math, reading, science, nothing. So I put this story together and we produce it, and it becomes our first big viral story. Goes everywhere. After the story airs, I started having teachers from Baltimore City reach out to me. And what they were saying was, you're right. You're completely right. But you realize these kids are still graduating. And I'm like, well, how are they graduating? They can't read or write. And the teacher said to me, well, because their grades are being changed from failing to passing, and they're being pushed through the school system. They're being matriculated through the school system to the point where they get a diploma that some of them can't even read. So I had more and more teachers come out to me, and I interview these teachers. The interviews are in Failure Factory. You can see what they say for themselves. And in November of 2017, I filed a public records request with Baltimore City Public Schools. And what I asked for were documents, emails, internal investigations related to grade changing. And the school system gave me nothing. They actually literally did not give me one piece of paper. So in December of 2017, Project Baltimore sued Baltimore City Public Schools for violating Maryland's Public Information Act. In February of 2019, we go to trial, we go to court. I testified for a few hours in front of a circuit court judge. And in March of 2019, the judge finds that Baltimore City Schools, and these are her words, willfully and knowingly violated the law by not handing over the documents. What she said was she believed that the school system knew it was breaking the law by not handing over the documents. And the reason she said they did it was to hide potential wrongdoing. So at this point, 2 years into Project Baltimore, my pendulum is starting to move, right? So now I'm starting to think maybe the school system really isn't that focused on educating kids. Maybe it is just the funding. So when we start getting the documents, we find a massive scheme of the school system going into the grade books of teachers, changing failing grades to passing so kids can matriculate through. We had 8,000 emails from teachers. Many of the teachers, and the emails are in Failure Factory, you can read them for yourselves. The teachers are writing their administrators saying, please stop going into my grade book. This student did not pass my class, does not deserve to graduate. Why did I see them get a diploma on Saturday? 8,000 emails. So this is the point where I said to myself, they're right. The people that told me that in 2017 were right. In 2022, now 5 years, this is a 5-year long investigation that's in Failure. Now, Failure Factory covers 9 years, from 2017 to 2025, those 8 years. This particular investigation covers 5 years. The Inspector General for Education of Maryland, after we win our lawsuit, he opens his own investigation. And he has something I don't have, which is called subpoena power. He concludes that over a 4-year period in Baltimore City, there were more than 12,500 failing grades changed to passing. Kids did not do any extra work. They did not hand in any extra assignments. And he said 10% of the kids at some schools are graduating who should not have. They did not earn it. And at that point, when we saw the scope of what was going on, and we saw that Baltimore City Schools was willing to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to not hand over the documents and make them public, That is when my pendulum had fully swung, and I said, yeah, the school system is not focusing on educating kids. They're focusing on acquiring funding. So much so that they're willing to spend massive amounts of money to hide it from the public. That was kind of a long answer, but that was the evolution that I had. And then, there's so many other things involved in it, but that was sort of those 5 years of me having to live through that, go to court, sue a school system. And by the way, that school system is graduating kids who simply do not have the math and reading skills they need in a city that is struggling. And why is the city struggling? Because it's graduating kids who don't have the math and reading proficiencies they need to succeed.
When we were in the green room before we started off, I told you that these things often go off the rails from what my planned structure of the conversation usually is. This is going to be one of those moments, because just that point alone, to me, just again, my blood cannot boil anymore. You send these kids out of high school, and there's been plenty of these programs. No Child Left Behind is one of the ones that rings a bell to me, whatever that act, whoever created that one at one point. But I remember hearing about that. And it's just, who are you actually benefiting at that point, right? When you send these kids through high school, I know that you're trying to pump them up and stuff. That was always the excuse. You don't want them to feel like they're getting left behind and they're being punished for that. And I get that. But you're sending them out, like you alluded to, Chris, to the real world with absolutely no skills, no basic skills. If you can't read in 2026, you literally cannot do anything. Everything we do is tied to technology, whether it's your phone or a computer. And I understand that it could dictate back to you, but you still have to look at your phone. You still have to do something. Icons and emojis have maybe changed people's mindset on that a little bit, but you're an unfunctioning member of society at that point. And then what happens? You go into the system, and then you become a drain on the system. You're on unemployment, you're on welfare, you're probably living in poverty, and you're never going to escape that. It's just, to make a buck, there are so many ways to defraud the government and to defraud other people. Do you have to do it on the backs of children? Like, it's just,
Well, here's why. $1.8 billion a year. That's what the school system's getting. So you may say, okay, well, how does changing a failing grade to passing or giving a kid a diploma earn money? And here's how. And here's what I did not understand in 2017 that I understand now, and why I wrote Failure Factory. Schools do not get money to educate kids. It's like that in Maryland, and it's like that in most every state. They don't get money to educate kids. They get money to enroll kids.
Yep.
Funding is based on enrollment. Funding is not based on education. And those are two very different things. The incentive of a school is to enroll a kid. That's how they get their money. The incentive is not to educate the kid. So when you pass a kid, when you take a failing grade and turn it to passing, what are you doing? You're making sure that kid comes back the next year because they can see light at the end of the tunnel. They can see a diploma 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years away. And the school system will get money for each one of those years. If the kid fails, that child is more likely to drop out. And then what happens? The school doesn't get the money. So why would you change a failing grade to passing? Because it ensures that the money keeps coming in.
That's an interesting point. I've heard that a lot. Enrollment rates. You see that a lot where we are in New Jersey. They always talk about enrollment rates. There are a lot of other topics that we probably couldn't even go down on here. We'll get flagged by YouTube for, but there are towns in New Jersey that are just littered with public or private schools that the towns are responsible for busing them and whatnot, and their enrollment rates are at the floor, and these schools have no money. The staff turnover is over 50% every single year. Again, not to diverge off there, but I've never thought about it in that way. You hear the enrollment rates, but you don't kind of equate the two. Mr. Phillips, I've seen you nodding your head a couple times there, but you're unusually quiet for a topic that I know that you're probably ready to explode on as well.
I'm just kind of thinking back to my own experience, right? Like I have children, right? Shane, I know you have kids. Chris, you as well, I believe. And my youngest daughter, she's 8 years old. All right, and she's not a superstar. She's not an A+ student, but she's no dummy, right? And more often than not, when she comes home from school and she's doing math homework, it's as if though she had never seen her homework before. It's like she's doing it and she'll ask me for help. And I try to, push her along so that she can do it and that I can help in where need be. But it's as if it was written in hieroglyphics. She has it's like she's never seen it before. And what I found staggering is that we went in for parent-teacher conference. I brought this up, and the teacher was like, oh, no, she's doing great in math. And I'm looking at her like, lady, she's looking at her paper like she's never seen this before. How is she doing great in math? Are you kidding me? Now, granted, right, it's a nuanced topic. And, I'm in a pretty decent school system, right? There are some just lazy teachers out there. But point is, how do you continuously push kids along and pass them when it's very clear and obvious that they're not the level that they should be at? It's just absolutely mind-blowing. And again, I'm not saying that my daughter's situation is exactly right, like what's happening in Baltimore right now, and I'm sure in many other school districts in many states throughout the country. But I was just kind of reflecting back on my own experiences, and it is wild.
Well, let's talk about some data points, because I think these data points would really put a lot of this into perspective, because everything that I just said and what failure factor really does is it backs up everything with data. Data from the Maryland State Department of Education, data from the U.S. Department of Education, and Baltimore City Public Schools. So let's just go over some of this quickly, and this will open up a whole different avenue that we can go down. And we'll start where the book begins and ends. So in 2017, when Project Baltimore began, Baltimore City Schools had a $1.3 billion budget. In 2025, Baltimore City Schools had a $1.8 billion budget. So the school system got $500 million more dollars a year over those 8 years. That's a 38% increase in funding. The graduation rate in Baltimore City Schools was 70% in 2017. The graduation rate in 2025 was 71%. So the school system got a 38% increase in funding, and graduation rates went up 1 point. Math proficiencies in 2017 were 11%. 11% of the kids in the entire school system tested proficient in math, meaning 89% of the kids were not proficient in math. 8 years later, in 2025, with a 38% increase in funding, math proficiencies were 12%. They went up 1 point. So now you're probably thinking to yourself, okay, how can you have a 71% graduation rate and 12% of your kids are proficient in math? It happens because you're changing grades, you're pushing the kids through when they didn't deserve to get pushed through, and because you're trying to acquire the money. Because the focus of the education system is not to educate kids. If the focus were to educate kids, you would not have 88% of your kids not proficient in math. The focus is on educating the funding. They saw a 38% funding increase in 8 years. And if you really want to look at where any organization, not just public schools, but where any organization is putting its focus, all you got to do is look and see where it's improving. Where is it getting better? Well, in public education, the only place that they're showing significant improvement is funding. $500 million more dollars a year, and 12% of your kids are proficient in math. It's really, you asked me in the beginning, what was the point where like you really, figures that you need to write this book and let people know. And like all these things are starting to come together now. I have to sue the school system to get documents about grade changing that is leading to 71% graduation rates and 12% math proficiencies, as the school system is getting 1.8 billion tax dollars a year. Like there's a quote in the book where a guy says, you know, our tax dollars are going to this school system, and the people are getting very wealthy. Many people are getting very wealthy in the school system, but yet our kids aren't getting the academic outcomes, and it's killing our city because our economy can't grow. And his statement was, we, the taxpayer, are funding our own demise. And when he said that, I just was like, wow. Like, this is a guy living in Baltimore City who's recognizing that his tax dollars are funding his own demise within his city. And not only is that extremely sad and heartbreaking, but he believes it, and he believes that the numbers show it to be true.
Imagine how demoralizing that must be to be a resident of that city and watching it crumble around you as your taxes, your cost of living continue to increase, and all the things you get continue to decrease.
I will say that
especially when it is your children.
At the time, he was a Baltimore City resident. When he told me that, he left.
Good for him. Good for him. A lot of people don't do that. There's nostalgia in living in the town you grew up in or living in the area that you love, right? You want to think that you can make it better, and it's not always the case. A good segue, you kind of touched on it a little bit. You know, when performance is not dramatically improving, but these budgets continue to expand, where does that additional money go? Like, it's obviously not flowing into the classrooms. Is it just expanding administration? Is it central office roles? Is it salaries? Is it hiring my buddy to come in and consult for me? Like, where is the money going? If you were able to figure that out, if with all the dancing around you had to do to get copies of these budgets and these documents.
So here, let me show you. So in the book, in the back of the book, I have a chart that answers all of that. So what I do is this chart right here. Maybe you can kind of see that. This chart goes over the 8 school years that the book covers. And every single year, it goes over student academic outcomes. So I go over budget, enrollment, cost per student, graduation rates, SAT scores, mean AP grade exam, attendance, dropout rates, chronic absenteeism, college enrollment, and so on. And I also go through the employees. How many people are employed in the school? And more importantly, what are their roles? So you're talking about $500 million additional dollars a year. Where is that money going? So that's the question that you're asking. Well, let me tell you this. In the 8 school years that this book covers, starts in 2017, the number of instructional teachers that Baltimore City Public Schools was employing in 2017 was 5,149. 5,149. This is Maryland State Department of Education data right here. The number of teachers 8 school years later, 5,149. It didn't go up. So the school system got $500 million additional dollars. Now, I can look at this chart and I can see that they hired 1,300 additional employees over those 8 school years. Not one of them was a teacher. Not one. So what were they? Well, they were administrative staff, director level positions, things like that. So places in the C-suite, places in, central office, like that is where the money was going. And it kind of goes back, like let's go back to the refrain of this. The focus is not on educating kids, the focus is acquiring funding and using that funding to hire adults. If you were running a school system and someone gave you $500 million a year, more than you had, don't you think you would hire some teachers? You would hire some additional teachers? Like if you're running a school system, Baltimore City didn't do that. And this is not my data. Chris Papst did not come up with this data. This is Maryland State Department of Education data. This is where it's coming from. And we can see they didn't hire teachers.
That's wild. And you know what? When we first began this conversation, Chris, my mind initially went to, and I still feel like it sort of makes sense to a degree, right? And I was kind of playing out the scenario in my head where, okay, if you have an increased amount of students, right, obviously more students is going to require a larger budget, because if you have more kids, they're involved in more activities. You don't want classes to have 40, 50 kids. You might have to hire additional teachers, so on and so forth. That would make sense. But to the data that you just spoke to, A, that's either not occurring or simply doesn't equate to the additional need for $500 million more dollars. Because if you're not hiring teachers, like the most important job that you would have in a school system, then clearly that's not the case, right? And the fact that these administrative and, these executive type positions are expanding, Shane, we talk about it all the time, right? And this is kind of like, this phrase has kind of been used ad nauseum, but follow the money, right? Where does the money lead? And you'll find your answer. That's nauseating. That is nauseating.
So you mentioned enrollment, right? Let's go back to my chart. I'll tell you exactly what the enrollment has done.
Let's go.
So the enrollment in 2017 in Baltimore City Public Schools, enrollment in 2017, 82,354. 8 school years later, 75,811.
Wow.
The school system lost about 7,000, 8,000 kids, come out to about 8%, right? About around 8% they lost. So now let's put it in that perspective. Now you're getting $500 million additional dollars to educate fewer kids.
Yeah.
And you have 1,300 additional employees over those 8 school years to educate fewer kids. And your graduation rate goes up 1 point. Your math proficiency rates go up 1 point. At some point, if the school systems keep moving the way that they're moving, you're going to have 1 teacher per kid, because the enrollment's going down. And I shouldn't say 1 teacher, 1 employee per kid, because the enrollment's going down, but the number of employees is going up. We can see it. It's happening in real time. Again, this is not just Baltimore. And part of the reason I wrote Failure Factor is because I want you to look at this data in your school system. It's not hard to find. You just got to take a couple minutes. And in the book, I show you where to find it and how to find it. And you can see how these trends are playing out where you are. And we know this is happening nationwide. We know that the number of students enrolled is going down. And it's because people are choosing other options. They're choosing homeschooling. They're choosing private schools, parochial schools, Catholic schools. But at the same time, we're seeing that the number of people employed by public schools is going up. At some point, if we keep moving this way, this is not an exaggeration. This is not hyperbole. We're going to have 1 employee per kid. Like, that's the way we're moving.
Yeah.
And still, the academic outcomes are not getting better.
Right.
Not significantly.
You know what's ironic about that? And I really only noticed this. I noticed it around the holiday time, right? And my wife is putting together, gifts for all the teachers. And there's like 12 gifts, per kid. And I'm like, how many teachers do these kids have? So I start asking my daughter, well, who is this? Who is this? Who is this? And, oh, that's Mrs. So-and-so. That's Mrs. So-and-so. I'm like, well, are they your teachers? She's like, well, they're not really a teacher, but they're like helpers. And by the way, as I alluded to earlier, right, like my children are in like very normal classes. They're not any kind of like special needs or any kind of special help. These aren't like paras. I don't know who these people are. But, like, I don't know, man, when I went to school, I had, especially in elementary school, I had 1 teacher. Yeah, of course, then you had a gym teacher and you had a computer lab and so on and so forth. But, like, you were in Mrs. Hendrickson's class. You were in Mrs. Barrow's class, and that was it. 1 teacher. Maybe you had a student teacher come in, right, that was, ready to graduate and then go off on their teaching journey on their own. But now, and I don't know if it's the same, if you guys experience as well, there's like 6 people in the classroom. Only one of them's actually a teacher, but there's 6 other women in there, usually women. They're being paid by the school system for what? I don't get it. That's starting to make sense.
I just told you. You got 1,300 additional employees. You got the enrollment going down. You got the money going up. I mean, it's these things. a lot of these things don't make sense unless you look at it through a different paradigm. And when I've been doing my book tour, and as I'm going through and I'm talking to people about these issues, people have a hard time accepting it, kind of like I did in January of 2017, where I didn't want to believe it. And you want to believe that the school systems have your best interest at heart and have your children's best interest at heart. But when you have such high amounts of money that are now coming in, what we're seeing is that there's still a lot of great people that are getting into education for the right reasons, but there's a growing number of people that are getting into public education because it's now a means to acquire wealth. It's a way that you can get a really good six-figure salary, you can get a great pension, excellent health care, you can have your summers off, you get all your weekends and holidays and Christmas and Easter and New Year's and all that stuff off, which for most people that are watching us right now, we work over those days.
Yeah.
Right? Schools are shut down and you can still make a six-figure salary and you can still get yourself a great pension. And that, I think, I make the case in Failure Factory, and you guys can tell me what you think of this, but I make the case that I think at one point we hit this threshold where we started putting too much money into education. And we started attracting people into the industry that would not have gotten into the industry otherwise. And I don't think that is helpful to the industry, certainly isn't helpful to our kids. And I still believe that most teachers get into public education for the right reasons. But just like we just spoke about, the school systems aren't adding teachers. That's not the positions that they're adding. They're adding all these other positions, these director level and administrative level positions. What do these people do? I don't even know. They have really fancy titles. And when you go to the school system, apparently these people are absolutely vital, even though their position didn't exist 3 years ago. Like, you cannot do without this position. It wasn't even here in 2022. Like, there's so many things that you start putting together and they don't make sense. And that's what we're doing as investigative journalists, is that we're asking the questions like we did in 2017, the hows and whys that we're working through right now on your show. And I think that we've kind of laid out the case of the how and the why. But now we got to get into, why is it still happening? Like, this is 2026. We know how to educate kids. All right. We know how to educate kids. And quite frankly, if you talk to a teacher, any teacher is going to tell you it's really not that hard to educate kids. All right. There's just a couple basic things that you need. You need some discipline. You need some organization. You need to hold the kids accountable for their actions. You need a little bit of money in the classroom for supplies, and you can educate kids. But at this point, what we have in public education in America is that we have all these contractors that are now coming in, selling curriculum. They're selling computer-based programs. There's tens of millions of dollars in contracts getting thrown around, and all these industries are now forming around public education. It's confusing the hell out of teachers. They're changing the curriculum every 2 years. The teachers aren't being trained for curriculum. They're being trained to administer computer programs. It is an absolute mess. And I'll make the point again that I think at some point too much money got involved in public education and everybody wants a piece of it.
I'm really glad you said that. In my day job, which all of our listeners mostly know, I work in technology. I'm not taking any offense to all the computer programs there, but I saw the same thing. I had an opportunity to work with some school districts, and one of the business administrators I had worked with was came from the private sector, kind of got into public, and then had the mindset that, like, we need to shave down administrative staff. We need to take power away from the board, who are just kind of shoving in their family members into these like auxiliary roles that didn't exist. And we went in and we slashed their technology budget by 70% in 6 months. Of all of these things that were being paid for that nobody even knew existed, they took funds from that thing that happened in 2020 that we can't say on YouTube because then our videos get flagged. They took funds from that and bought brand new Apple iMacs for an elementary school for kids that like barely know how to do anything. They barely know how to click. These were like $2,000 a pop computers that were used once a week, if that. And so we sold them online. We replaced all of the equipment for all the teachers in every classroom with that money that we sold those for, which was twice as much as the 25 computers we had to set there. And so it's like we made all these like really strategic moves to bring down the budget and to really focus and to upgrade everything. You talk about, teachers didn't have training. That was the biggest fear when we walked in there. It's like, oh, you're going to throw more computer programs on us. And they were giving us all the lists of the things they did. And we simplified it down. And like everything we did was like, here's what we're going to do. Here's what we're going to train you on. And if there's something they didn't want to do, we just stopped trying to implement it. Like, we're not going to worry about that then. We'll do something else. Long story short, this administrator ends up not being ousted from the district, but more or less getting forced out. They couldn't afford to pay him an extra $10,000 or $12,000 a year. They just did not like him at all. And to replace him, they hired 2 business administrators that each made the same amount of money that he made. Neither of them worked on site. To this day, they don't work on site. After they terminated our contract, they brought back that 70% budget that we cut. They rehired all those services. They hired a company that charged twice as much as we charged and then billed them hourly. So like we watched this budget go from something that we shrunk down so small so you can like operate and then compensate the people that are actually working there, to just people come in, they hired a bunch of friends and family, they gave the jobs people that aren't even close to the district. They don't have anything. All the administrators in that building right now, in that district, do not ever step foot on site ever, period, zero. But they're running a district. So I have long thought that, working largely in the private sector and with a lot of businesses that think strategically, right? Like you have to conserve funds. When you spend money on something, you have to be able to execute on that, or you're going to fail. You're going to lose your job if you're an employee, or your company's going to fail. And then I've seen what's happening there. And it's like, I always thought like, oh, this is like a gold mine for a company like mine, because I can help walk them through how to save money and operate like that, only to realize they don't want to. And when you try to say things like, oh, you're being overfunded or this model is broken, you get attacked. You hate children. You hate teachers. You're the devil. I'm curious, in your reporting and really your exposing of all this, has that started to happen to you too, where people are just spitting on you and shouting on you and just kind of chewing you down because you hate all these kids and these teachers and everything because you're just trying to expose the corruption?
It happened in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So in 2017, when we started this, and I come from Washington, D.C., and I know there's probably some people that are watching this, or some people that are just listening to this, but I'm a white guy, and I come into Baltimore City, which is an overwhelmingly black city, and a school system that is 93% minority. 93% minority. And I come in and I start exposing all these things. I'm suing the school system. I'm finding 6 schools with no kids proficient in anything. And that, I mean, that's just one story of many that we have done like that, this in failure factory. And in the beginning, I got a lot of pushback. And I actually have the emails and I have the voicemails in the book. And you can read them for yourself, of people calling me racist, and I'm going to get myself killed, and I'm going to walk through the city and get shot one day, and all these different things. And all because I was telling the truth about what was happening in the school system. So what ended up happening was that we sort of like stuck through it. And there were 3 times where the threats got a little bit too much, and we had to call police, and police had to go find the person and say, hey, you being serious about this? Like, what are you doing here? And then after about 3 or 4 years, those things started to go away. And I think they went away because we didn't go away. And we started earning the trust, and we started earning the respect of the community, that the stories that we were telling and the information that we were sharing was indeed factual and accurate. And we were starting to make a difference. The Baltimore City Schools had to revamp its entire grading policy because of the stories that we did on grade changing, and when we sued them and exposed how big the problem actually was. And there have been laws that have been changed. When we won that lawsuit, that set legal precedent throughout the entire state of Maryland for how to handle public records requests lawsuits. That was a pivotal moment in the jurisdiction, the jurisprudence, if you will, of Maryland, that there aren't that many public records lawsuits out there. And for us to win that, it really set a precedent moving forward about what to do if a government organization isn't going to give you public records. And now we're getting to the point where even if you don't like us, you still respect us. And in 2023, I was given the Vanguard Award by the Maryland State Conference NAACP. And then in 2024, I received the Education and Excellence Award from the NAACP in Baltimore County chapter. So I went from being called a racist and saying that I was going to get myself killed walking through Baltimore to getting 2 NAACP awards for the work that is in Failure Factory, directly for that work, because the NAACP realized this is a 93% minority school system, and these kids are not getting the education that they need. The argument is they're getting screwed. Their life chances are getting stomped because the school system is not properly educating them. And I'll make this last point on this topic, that the national headquarters for the NAACP is in Baltimore. So for all this to happen, and for somebody like me to be getting recognized by the NAACP, the state chapter, for the work that we're doing, I really think lends itself to the value of local journalism, and lends itself to the importance of what investigative journalism can do for a community, and how it can help. And, journalism's been in a tough place for the past 20 or 30 years. You guys probably just saw that the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette's going out of business. The Washington Post just slashed, a third of its workforce, and they're owned by Jeff Bezos. So, media is in trouble, and media has been in trouble for a long time, specifically local media. And part of the reason that Sinclair's doing this and Fox 45 is putting these resources into local journalism is to show its value. And, I think what Failure Factory does is really attempt to show the value of what we can do and how we can help our local communities.
I think you nailed it with value, because you don't see this kind of reporting and investigation done at all anymore. We are guilty of criticizing media all the time, but there are certain people like yourself,
and the
that
media
are
may
still
deserve
willing
it.
to do
I'm not saying the media doesn't deserve to be criticized.
Right, of course. It's like you just, when you watch like old time movies, or you look through like history books and stuff, there's always like those like valiant reporters that like went into the fire, went into the trenches, walked down the streets of Baltimore with threats of being shot at, right? And that's what like kind of set the precedent for change. And so, that's a lot of what you've been kind of presenting today, and just even in doing some research on you, just that's the aura that I'm getting. That's the impression that I get from it. It's cool. It's nice to see people that care enough to try to implement that change, because most people won't, and they'll just kind of look the other way and say, hey, this is bigger than me. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm just going to just forget about it and just keep paying my bill, which, listen, I mean, we're all guilty of that to some degree, but to actually like try to fight for it when those first couple years, I'm sure, were daunting, because you were filing Oprah requests and you were getting back blank pieces of paper. Like, that's just got to be so demoralizing at that point. It's just like, why am I wasting my time on this? And then people yelling at you and calling you this and that. It's like, I'm trying to help you all. Why are you crapping on me? But to stick through it, that's super admirable. I very much respect that, for sure.
Thank you. It wasn't easy, but
I just can't imagine.
So like the other thing about it that people have asked me is why education? And quite frankly, I told you why we picked education, but people would ask me, why are you passionate about education? And the answer is like, I wasn't. I was passionate about investigative reporting. And I could have been investigative reporting anything, like civil engineering, the criminal justice system, juvenile justice, the courts. It could be anything. Like I love my job and I love what I do. And when I was able to apply what I do to education, like I'm now really passionate about education because of what we have uncovered and the massive problems that there are. And, in Failure Factory, I make the point that I think is probably the most salient point, which would be that Baltimore City is really at the end stages of what happens to a society that has a failing public education system. So I don't know, your audience, but they probably don't schedule vacations in West Baltimore. And you're probably not scheduling vacations in East Baltimore or South Baltimore. Every single year, Baltimore is one of the most deadly crime-ridden cities, not just in America, but in the Western Hemisphere. It used to have nearly 1 million people. Now it's down to about 500,000. It has 15,000 blighted structures that nobody lives in, and there 20 to 25% of the population lives in poverty. And the point that I make in the book is that all of those things are not the problem. They're all the symptom of the problem.
Right.
The problem is, for far too long, the people of the city are simply not getting the education that they need from their public education system. And the enormity of that, and what I feel to be true, I feel that that is absolutely true. It's really helped me go. And even with the people that, were saying that I was going to get myself killed, or, the people that were actually literally threatening me, I thought to myself, there's a bigger issue here. And, they probably don't realize it. And those people are the problem. And those people are the reason Baltimore is the way Baltimore is. But if we can get through to the other people, and we can convince them that, hey, this system can be saved. And at the same time, write a book like Failure Factory to say to the rest of the country, hey, don't follow Baltimore's lead when it comes to public education, because you know what? You probably are. Most of the country is. Most of the country is going down that road. And, I wrote the book so people can read it and understand it and stop it.
We're going to have to change the word book to manual, because it really sounds like that's what it's become, is a manual to kind of manufacture your way out of this cycle of destruction, right?
Yeah, I hope it if it's someday, if people start to look at it that way, that would be great. And, it's not necessarily, because Chris Papst wants to sell books. It's more, why I kept doing this when I have kids and people were saying I'm going to get myself killed, because I do believe that there's a larger issue here, and it's a larger societal issue. And it's the same reason that so many other people, do the same thing when they know that, why do cops go to work every day? They know that they may not come home. I'm not comparing myself to what a cop goes through, but I think that their mindset is very similar to what my mindset is.
Sure. I think that's the key too, right? Like you don't have to be a cop or a firefighter running into a burning building to still make change and to be passionate about something and want to care about your community and implement those changes. We were talking about in a recent episode, Tim, how the mindset of people has changed a little bit, and they're not just rolling over anymore and just kind of accepting things like this. There's this shift that's been happening where people are asking more questions and doing more things. Tim, do you feel like this is one of those things, like education's kind of the next on the bucket that we can speak up and do something about?
Look, I hope so. And Chris, it makes too much sense, right? And I'm glad that you brought up what you just recently did about Baltimore, and it's really it's no secret, and I kind of hesitated in discussing this earlier, but for anybody with half a brain in 2026, it's no secret that for years, for a long time now, Baltimore is looked at, and rightfully so, statistically proven, as a crime-ridden, impoverished city. Not the entire city, right? But good portions of Baltimore are, to your point, you wouldn't want a vacation there, right? And if you look at a place like New York City, right? It's a destination city, right? So, over half the population aren't from New York, right? People move there for job opportunity, for what, name that reason, whatever it might be. But in most other cities, right, throughout the United States, that aren't major hubs like New York, Chicago, LA, just to name, the top three, if you will, most of the folks that are living in those cities are the people that are from there naturally. They were born in and around that area. And so if you're graduating kids, and Shane, we just did an episode very recently about the Prussian school system, and we both agreed that, aside from what we're talking about today, you could really revamp the education system. But at the very least, if children are graduating high school and they can't read or write. That's a major problem. That goes far beyond the Prussian school system. Like, that is a major problem. So, long answer to your question, I really hope that people are starting to wake up to this because, I mean, Chris, with the work you did, it just makes too much sense. I mean, you can't, I don't know how you refute it. I don't know how you have a brain between your eyes and are a functioning human being and try to refute that argument. It just makes too much sense. I think it's awesome.
Well, no one's refuting it. So there's, this book came out, it's Amazon bestseller, it's doing very well. And no one's refuting the book. Like, not one person has come out and said this isn't true. A couple weeks ago, I was at the White House. I participated in a roundtable, talking about the book. The book has been brought up in appropriation committee hearings on Capitol Hill with the U.S. House. So it's getting powerful people that are talking about it, and no one's refuting it because there's nothing to refute because all the data is coming from the government. Like, I'm not making up the data. All I'm doing is I'm taking data from a million places and putting it all in one place to really show you how powerful, or what's the way to put this? I'm taking data points that, if you look at them individually, may not mean that much. But when you take them all and put them into one place, it really opens your eyes and you're like, oh my God. Like you're looking at that and you're like, holy cow, this is how big the problem is.
Yeah.
And that's really what we have done here. But I think that we are seeing public education come into the Overton window. It is certainly something that, after that thing that happened in 2020 that you can't mention, as soon as that happened and education came into people's houses on their computers, that sparked a fire, right? Because we know that enrollment's going down in public education because people saw what happened. They're going to homeschooling, they're going to private school, all these other things. And that energy hasn't gone away. We are seeing groups like Moms for Liberty, for example, that they have formed, and they're really growing. And their focus is school board elections, trying to get people on school boards. So there's already this momentum that is happening around the country. And what I really see my book, Failure Factory, as the next evolution of that. So people saw what happened in 2020 on their computers, and what this book is really doing is now taking you into the schools and showing you what's happening inside of those schools with the administrative state, the grade changing, the manipulation of data, the graduating kids that can't read. It's the how and the why that we set out to answer in 2017.
I know there hasn't been a ton of time kind of since the book's come out and really since a lot of your research has been out there. You mentioned you were just at the White House. Have you seen anything in Baltimore yet since, winning the lawsuit, making these points known? Has there been any trickle down effect, or is it kind of still just as is operating the same way as it was?
Well, there's a lot of things that have happened. So we mentioned that they had to revamp their entire grading processes. There have been state laws that have been changed as a result of reporting that's in the book. A lot of things like that have happened. But as I mentioned in the beginning, the student academic outcomes aren't getting better because there's nothing that I can do about that.
Yeah.
Because what has to happen there is, in order for that to happen, you have to have elected officials, public officials that are willing to hold the school system accountable, and public officials that are going to say, you know what, if we're going to give you all of this money, you have to give us better student outcomes. And if you don't, we're going to fire you, we're going to fire you, and we're going to fire you. And that is not happening. It's not happening in Baltimore, and I don't even see any signs that it could potentially happen in Baltimore. And a lot of it is just because Baltimore is a one-party rule kind of place. There are no checks and balances. And I'm not suggesting that Republicans have all the answers, but what I am suggesting is that a two-party control system is better than a one-party rule system. And what Baltimore has is a one-party rule system, and that one party protects itself. And if you have somebody coming out criticizing the school system, you're criticizing that political party because that political party has created and maintained that school system for 50 years.
Seriously, I mean, appreciate you so much for coming on and walking us through this. I know these aren't easy conversations. They're layered, they're emotional. but they do matter. We talked about it a few times throughout here that whenever you try to bring up education, it does hit people, whether it's a one-party system where people that have influenced the creation of that are getting offended, or if it's just trying to talk about it at a local school board meeting and people kind of crap on you because, you know, you hate teachers all of a sudden for trying to call into question things that aren't happening. Again, what you've done, at least to us, I can't speak for the whole world, I think means a lot because it is a blueprint for, I think, what the rest of us can kind of follow and look for in our own locations, townships, regional school districts, however that is set up. For those listening out there, if you have not already, please go check out Chris's work with Project Baltimore, and please grab a copy of Failure Factory. I know it's on Amazon, Chris. Do you have any links that we can send people to, a website, or just find you on Amazon?
Sure. So, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Goodreads, any bookstore would have it. If they
Awesome.
don't have it, they can order it. ChrisPapst.com, ChrisPapst. And on any social media, I'm just Chris Papst on Twitter, Chris Papst on Facebook. I'm very, very easy to find. And if people pick up a copy of the book and you read it, please reach out to me. Let me know. Like, my idea here was to start a conversation, keep the conversation going, and get people energized into improving our public education system. Reviews are always extremely helpful. I'm almost at 100 reviews on Amazon now.
That's awesome.
Almost a perfect score. I got 4.9 out of 5 stars. So
That's awesome.
it's doing really
There you
well.
You're right.
more of
No
those.
pushback. That's amazing.
Well, one person, what kind of irritates me about that? One person gave the book 3 stars, but didn't write a review, just gave it 3
Oh,
stars. And that
that
is
should be
what's giving
struck
me the
off there.
4.9.
Yeah.
So I need more people to go on there and give it a 5 to balance out that 3 that somebody gave. I don't even know what that's about. I wish they would have at least told me why they gave it a 3. Didn't even
It should
write
be
a review.
required. Yeah,
Yeah,
it
they
should
should
absolutely
be required to tell me why you gave it a 3. But thank you so much for having me on, man. It's been a great conversation. I really appreciate it, and especially like your interest in this. It is greatly appreciated. Thank you.
As soon as I told Tim we're doing one on education, he's like, "Man, you love that shit."
Oh,
Like,
he
I
does.
do. I'm obsessed with it.
Listen, there were many times throughout the night where Chris was talking, and I see Shane, I see the wheels turning, the eyes
God.
are wide, and he just can't wait to go, baby. So, match made in heaven.
This could have been like a 12-hour conversation, just like going back and forth with you, Chris. I'm not
Well,
even
if you
kidding.
want
There's
to,
so many things I want to hit on and expose, and yeah, I'm going crazy now.
if you pick up a copy of the book and you read it, I'll come right back on, man. Let's do it again.
I will be, and I encourage everyone again out there. I'm going to post the links down in the description below, whether you're watching on Spotify, on YouTube, or any of the other platforms in between. So check out those. When you do buy your book, take a picture, tag Chris on social media so he knows you have it, and make sure you leave those 5 stars. If this episode made any of you think or feel uncomfortable, that's the idea. Share it with a friend, share it with a teacher, share it with your local school board or administrators. They need to know about this stuff too, because it's stuff that impacts them that maybe they're not even aware about, or maybe they are, and they don't feel like they have the support around them to speak up about it. Like us, follow us, all the social media platforms, conspiracyrealist.com. Mr. Phillips, I'm going to give it to you to send us home. I love putting you on the spot right at the end.
Well, my drink is kicked, so time for a refill.
That's
Thanks,
it.
everybody.
Cheers, everyone. Until next time.